Hello, my friends. It has been a while. I want to apologize for my inconsistency lately with these videos. Some of you know I've had major computer issues, plus life is always busy. Yet through it all, God is always faithful. Today I'd like to share a couple of verses with you that are tucked away in the Old Testament. Please listen as I read Judges 13, verses 17 through 18. And Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, "What is your name, so that when your words come to pass, we may honor you?" But the angel of the Lord said to him, "Why do you ask my name, seeing it is wonderful?" God speaks to us through His Word. I think it's human nature for us to look for the extraordinary, for exciting events and experiences. But we need to recognize the treasure we hold in our hands when we read the Bible. It's God's Word to us, and He speaks personally to us through it. Now that is exciting and extraordinary, and it's the reason I want to share these verses with you today. I recently read through the book of Judges, and honestly, I found it depressing. It tells about the ancient Israelites and their many wanderings away from God. It details horrible immoralities and violence, and sometimes as I read, I couldn't help thinking about the similarities between that time period and our world today. It was heavy reading, to say the least. So one day, as I prepared to read, I asked God for something special. I longed for something encouraging. And as I became reacquainted with the story of Manoah and his wife and God's promise regarding their son Samson, I came across verse 18. And it delighted me deep within. It just warmed me right up. Because Manoah and his wife had an encounter with the pre-incarnate Christ. Isn't that fabulous? Let me back up a little to explain what happened so we can see verses 17 and 18 in context. The angel of the Lord visited Manoah's wife, who, by the way, is unnamed in this passage. But he told her in verse 3 that even though she was barren, she would conceive a son. He instructed her about her diet because God intended for her son to be a Nazirite from the womb. She couldn't drink wine or strong drink, and she also couldn't cut his hair. This child would grow up to become a judge in Israel who would begin to deliver the Israelites from the Philistines. Well, of course, this woman was amazed. She shared everything with her husband Manoah, and he prayed that the man of God would come again. God answered his prayer by appearing to the woman again, at which time she ran to get her husband. At that point, Manoah began to directly interact with the angel of the Lord, although he didn't realize exactly who it was. And he asked the angel of the Lord 3 questions. But before I get into those, I just want to mention that we don't hear from Manoah's wife throughout their dialogue, but I picture her quietly listening to the entire conversation. Manoah's first question is in verse 11. He asked, "Are you the man who spoke to this woman?" The angel of the Lord answered, "I am." Then Manoah went on to ask what his son's mode of life and vocation would be. The angel of the Lord responded by referring to the instructions he had already given to Manoah's wife. Finally, Manoah asked what the angel of the Lord's name was, and that's where verses 17 through 18 come in. The angel of the Lord answered with a question. He said, "Why do you ask my name, seeing it is wonderful?" A note in my Bible defines the word wonderful as incomprehensible. And I love that, because in all of his questioning, in all of his efforts to figure out what was going on, Manoah missed the most important detail. He was talking to God himself. He was in God's presence. And that was absolutely awesome. Even though Manoah didn't comprehend exactly who he was talking to, I think it was beginning to dawn on him. After this third question, he and his wife gave an offering to the Lord. And verse 20 tells us that the angel of the Lord ascended in the flame of the altar. We go on to read that after the angel of the Lord appeared no more, Manoah knew his identity. He feared death because he and his wife had seen God. That's when Manoah's wife spoke up again, and the words she said revealed her understanding of God's character. God's intention was not to harm them, but to interact and converse with them. In response, he wanted them to recognize and worship him. A few truths stand out to me from this account. First, Manoah's wife comes across as one who possessed a quiet trust in the Lord. She accepted the angel of the Lord's promise and his instructions. Second, Manoah strikes me as one who was hurried and pressed to understand all of the details. He had lots of questions, yet the Lord answered him with wisdom and patience. And third, the Lord's name is wonderful, incomprehensible. The knowledge that we can interact with the living God on a daily basis should inspire and amaze us. Whether we trust God with a quiet faith or we ask many questions, He is the same. He's patient and kind. He loves us. He knows us. And He wants us to know Him.